World.
What up, Bruce?
What up, Bruce?
And we're gonna Bro Meets World.
What is Boy Meets World?
I'm tired.
Ooh, and I'm exhausted.
And welcome back. Truer words have never been spoken, honestly. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Except you're actually Ceej.
Oh yeah, I'm Ceej, if you need to know.
And I'm actually Tony Curtis, if you were curious at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are your Boy Meets World fan cast. Welcome back. Glad to have you here for another episode, another season 7 episode.
Never seen something.
Right off the heels of our conversation with Erica Montolfo-Bura, who wrote this episode.
So interesting that we got to talk to her like right before we got to this episode. Such a great conversation. Loved having her on. You know, she's done incredible work. I didn't love this episode, if I'm being real. No,
there are lots of stuff,
Erica.
There are lots of stuff that I want to talk about. There are things that I really do like about this episode. And then there are things where I'm like, again, I'm curious, like how much was like put in and how much was like, nope, this was my idea from beginning to end. Because some things are like, yes, this is good. And then some things are like, this was thrown in there. I don't know. We'll get to the conversation. But speaking of conversation, if you guys would like to have a conversation with us, you can reach out to us at Boy Meets World at gmail.com or on at Boy Meets World on all the places. You can join our Patreon where we have all of these conversations, merch, polls, all the things that you guys enjoy.
All that shit.
All that jazz. And also, thank you guys for subscribing to our YouTube. You guys have really pushed those numbers up. You've been really great at it. All in all, we did the housekeeping stuff and just wanted to get that out of the way before we get into this episode. Let's get into this episode because I'm really excited to talk about this episode. Okay, but in order to do that, that means you would have to do the tell me about it.
Tell us about it. Cory and Topanga hate their place. Guilt trip their parents to buy them a new house, only to learn what life as a husband and wife is all about.
A little clunky, but you got the synopsis in there. And also the other day, I posted one of our Tell Me About It on our social, and someone was like, I read this in TC's voice. So I thought
Love it.
Okay, you guys, this is season 7, episode 10, Pickett Fences. Cory and Topanga continue to look for a place to live, coming across a house with a nook that they want Amy and Alan to co-sign on. In a B storyline, Eric and Jack get a new boss at the student union. In a C storyline, Rachel, Angela, and Shawn all consider their own living arrangements.
Lots going on in this episode.
A lot is going on. What's interesting is I think, with the exception of Jack and Eric, I think everything kind of makes sense. And Jack and Eric even makes sense if we were to do it in a different time. Like, remember how we were talking about The Honeymoon Is Over and how Eric was there for comic relief and we didn't really... Take this storyline and put it in last week's episode with Sherrick and Jack. It like does it like divert from the story? Is it no? It isn't. But at least it makes sense to give Eric, and then we can spend a little bit more time on Rachel, Shawn, and Angela. Like that's my thing.
Yeah, the Jack and Eric storyline is fine. Like we can get there. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's just fine. It doesn't do anything to help the episode, but you know, Eric has a lot of funny moments in this episode. Yes. I think more funny moments than he did last episode. There are some great, wonderful moments with this episode. Overall, the story that the lesson that Alan tries to teach Cory, I think is such a classic TGIF episode. This is the kind of story I would want for a season 7 of Boy Meets World. Of like, hey, you are leaving the nest and now there are all new challenges for you to face and new lessons for you to learn. You thought you learned it all in school, but now that you're in the real world, you have to learn the real shit. I would love it if that's like the primary focus. But there are some things in this episode, and we're going to get to it, about the way they treat living together, the way they treat Shawn and Angela's character particularly, that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. So we can get into all of it, but that's my off
I
the top.
completely agree. So it's so funny. All right. So to your point, my first reactions were I liked the A storyline a lot. The B storyline, I was like, most of my bruh moments will come from this B
Yeah.
storyline. But the C storyline even had like there were weird things where it's like again we are acknowledging that everyone is moving in together and that Angela and Shawn get to have a moment of being like, hey, we're living together and we get to do that and
Mhm.
that's new for us and that's fun for us. And Rachel's not really as much of a factor as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And we even addressed that. So I'm like, oh, we're actually addressing a lot of things that I feel need to be addressed. And it was written in my mind as someone who paid attention to the last few episodes.
Definitely.
I like that. However, to your point, I feel like some things were mixed messaging at best, if not just downright bad lessons
Yeah.
as Shawn and Angela are concerned. And then as far as Cory and Topanga are concerned, I do like the lessons that we're learning. And I like that we get to see them more as a couple. Like it's so funny. After they got married, they are kind of writing them as a duo.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see Danielle get to act and
Absolutely.
and actually participate because so for so long she was just a sideline character and now she gets to actively be involved with Cory's hijinks.
Yeah, we're seeing more Topanga than I feel like we have in a while in terms of just like her perspective, her voice, her ideas getting thrown out there. Like you said, her partnership with Cory is becoming more of a tag team duo in a way that I think really works both comedically and dramatically. Um, can we just talk about this opening scene?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's
Okay,
go straight to it.
yeah, yeah. So we cut to the apartment and we see Shawn and Angela there, and they're basically talking about like they're
Playing
playing
house.
house. They're playing
Yeah.
house. They're having a great time, and clearly they're fucking. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like that's kind of one of the things that is implied by Cory is that they're sluts and
They're living in sin and they're
they're living in
sluts.
sin and they're doing the deed. And I thought it was really funny the idea of them getting to play house, getting to be like, hey, we have our time, we are with each other. Life was so good before the kids came,
Hmm.
and the kids are Cory and Topanga because they are still avoiding being in their own house.
But what we're
And
seeing is that Angela and Shawn were like, well, I guess you could spend a few nights at our place. We don't know how long this has been going on, though.
we don't, but also it's interesting because this episode allows Angela and Shawn to be kind of the secure couple, at
Yeah.
least for the first half of it. And I think that's really great to see
Before
them.
they're shamed out of it.
We're gonna get there because I don't understand why they are. Like it did feel that was the one part out of everything that felt forced. Like I could allow so much, but like Angela and Shawn are doing well. They are living together, and the idea of them living together is good. And the idea of them having to figure out how to balance, hey, we both haven't had stability. We both haven't had a family. We both are constantly moving around and switching places. So now we're in one place at one time. We are saying that we're committed with each other. Let's talk and see how that goes. And it just kind of the show makes up a reason for them not to do that.
Not to do that. And I would just say it would have been so interesting to see two couples where it's like, okay, the only difference between this is that you're married and we're not. And
Yes.
like, okay, so are there other differences that come into play? Are there other things to go into that? Or is it a thing of where Cory's complaining and Shawn's looking at him and saying, hey, you could have done this. You could have just dated. Like,
Yeah.
you guys decided to get married. So, like, I mean, yeah, I could have done without the shame aspect, but like I said, there's other things we can focus on. I really think that the story of Cory and Topanga was strong enough on its own of them wanting to go get a house, getting excited about a starter home, asking for a loan, like all of there's tons to do there. We don't need to muddy up the story with Shawn and Angela.
No, let's continue with Cory and Topanga, which is to say that, as you pointed out, they're staying with Shawn and
Mhm.
Angela and Rachel at this point in time, and they're like, "You gotta go." We're
Yeah,
like,
they're done.
You're cramping our style." go. And they go, you don't think we have other friends? And I like the idea that they're acknowledging they don't have any other friends.
No.
Why would anyone be friends with them outside of these three that are like almost required to be friends with them for various reasons? And then we see them move out, and Cory brings Topanga to this house. And I'm already like, no, whatever it is, no. And
Yeah.
I also like this idea of like we get a little bit of Topanga being kind of self-aware of like, hey, we can't afford this. We can't like the real estate agent is being sneaky and she's like, you're lying to him and you're letting him believe that he can afford this when we know you can't. We can barely afford a sandwich. You know what I'm saying? Like I
I
like
can
this a little
really
bit. Go ahead.
I can really understand Topanga's frustration here. In fact, I think it should have been a little bit more because I think that really Cory did something that was really messed up, which is to say, like, hey, we've been living in like a roach motel, essentially, and it's been like the biggest struggle of our middle class lives, essentially. So, no matter how like it may look from the outset, for us, this is trauma. And so, the way I'm going to do that is to promise you things that I can't follow through with, or I haven't thought through. And like Topanga comes out really hard at first at being like, you know what, Cory, this is cruel. She said it's so cruel for you to bring me
Yeah.
here. And the thing is that like, and I want to spend more time on the scene, but eventually Topanga kind of comes on board in a way where
Yes.
I'm just like, you gotta use your head too to pick like where are you valedictorian, like I really need you to use your brain smarts to kind of help Cory. Like if Cory's the idea man, you need to be the person who's like wait, logically that's not going to work because of A, B, and C or something. Like I need her to use her intellect in this relationship because it seems like Cory just keeps coming up with schemes and convincing her to go along with it based off of the honeymoon episode in this. And so I want her to be a little bit more combative and like to challenge him
See,
more.
I'm gonna say something a little risky, but I think what you're dealing with right now is white feminism. Like they said, it was a lot easy for Topanga when everything was good, when she had a bed to sleep in, when she could put her hair down, when she could wash in a shower with water that she felt comfortable in. It was easy to be like all for it, but for rights and speaking up. But right now, she does kind of she wants a comfortable living space.
Yeah.
And that I understand. I do understand it is like there is something real about the fact that she would be like, hey, we can't do this. And in the moment, they kind of make it feasible. And they're like, all you have to do is get someone to sign. I mean, we saw her get a loan in not Hawaii. So
Yeah.
of course she's like, all right, I'll just take out another loan. How bad could that be? Co-sign. I do think it's again, what bothers me is that we don't even acknowledge Topanga's parents. And that's one of the things I meant to ask Erica about. I was like, did you guys ever once think, why don't we even have like a line that says, because they said we just need two adults to co-sign, two parents. And they go directly to Alan and Amy. And I'm like,
Yeah.
y'all didn't even try Topanga's parents. It's crazy. You know
Especially
who
because
to make
Topanga's
up
dad
for?
has so
Yeah.
much to make up for. Like, yeah, that's the person you go to.
Exactly. You go to the one who you need to guilt trip, not the one who told you last week he wasn't helping you. That's not going to do you any favors. But really quickly, before we move on, I want to hit our roll call because we have this is where we meet
The real estate agent.
Orly, who plays Mrs. Stevens. She was a character.
Edith. Yeah.
Yeah, she was a character actress from the 60s and 70s, most notably Laugh-In. She was also the voice of the wardrobe in Beauty and the Beast and Miss Maple in a Goofy movie. And I included that one specifically for you.
And you know me, I'm a diehard Goofy movie fan. I have no idea who Miss Maples is in that movie.
She's the secretary.
Oh, for Principal Mazer. Got
Exactly.
it.
Also, I will say that she was too big for me. Like when I found out that she was best known for Laugh-In, I was like, that makes sense because this is a Laugh-In performance. This is a like over the top 60s comedic performance. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't understand why we're doing this.
It's
Like
giving Julie Happerfield from
yes,
who was the wedding planner when they were
yes,
planning their wedding, like just really big guest spotty, like very
yes,
sitcom guest spotty. Like I don't
yes.
really know this, but I know television enough that I'm gonna do this a certain way. And you know, I it doesn't work for me. She doesn't work for
Mm-mm.
me. What is probably the most interesting part about this whole thing, 2 bed, 2 bath, Philadelphia,
$80,000.
$80,000.
80.
What? What?
I immediately got angry. $80,000 for a house.
For a house?
And they were struggling. And I was like, every millennial is dying right now.
No. I'm sorry, you don't mean 800,000?
No,
Just
just 80.
80,000?
Just 80.
This is chump change. This is embarrassing at this point.
Which, I mean, also, it does make sense why they would be like, oh, in college, maybe we can afford this. Yeah. Maybe you can.
Maybe you could. Well, it's so funny because they're like, do you know how long it's going to take us to save $80,000? And I was like, I don't know. How long is it going to take for you? Because
Well, here's again, you just need to save to put down the deposit. That's what's crazy. And
there's
then,
so much logistics about that whole thing that needs to be talked through. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, well, because what they do is, again, she tells them that they can have this house. All they need are co-signers, essentially.
Mhm.
They go to Alan and Amy, and they're like, hey, we found a place. It's great. All we need is for you to sign this. I was like, it felt, I think, intentionally. It felt very much like, we just need you to sign this permission slip. Don't look at it.
Don't look at it. Yeah. Don't think too much about it. We've already thought this through. And I love
Exactly.
that Alan sees right through it. And he's just like, well, Amy said, don't call them stupid out loud. And Alan's like, I didn't say that. She's like, well, I was thinking it then. Love that.
Yeah, that was a really funny joke. And then, oh, okay, I know what I was going to say. Alan and Amy being brought back in was something that Erica said last week, which I thought was really important. She said that they've kind of removed Feeney and they are now relying on the parents again. And I was like, yes, we are using Alan and Amy again to tell stories, to teach their children, for Cory to learn from. And I do like this. I like this use of Alan and Amy. I feel they work as a couple in this episode.
Yeah.
But then also the idea of them saying you can't buy a house before you have a job is like, it seems so simple. And yet I feel like a lot of people don't understand that you can't put the cart before the horse.
Well, again, this is where I'm like, Topanga, you're so smart. Like, why does that simple math need to be explained to you, that you need a job for you to buy a house? Like, why is that something you can't figure out on your own? And again, at no point is Cory looking at Topanga or Topanga looking at Cory being like, maybe we should get jobs. Like, it's not happening. So what are they expecting?
Especially when you consider the fact that they're like, hey, we're going to, Cory's like, we're not going to miss a payment. It's like, but you don't have a job. How are you not? Why are you mad that I'm literally just asking you, where's your money coming from?
It's giving Martin. It's giving, you don't got no damn job.
You ain't got no job, Cory. Exactly. I think it's interesting because they don't even go into this, but like Alan being like, hey, you need a job, figure it out. Of course, this place is tough. Of course, you don't like where you live. Because one of the things they don't make an argument for is buying a house doesn't stop the expenses. Like, it's not just buying the house, it's the utilities, it's the upkeep, it's all of the furniture. There's so much more that goes into it that you can't just add on to your loan, even if we were to co-sign for this. So you have to learn to take care of the things that you have before you can get something bigger.
Can I also just say something that I found annoying both during the original viewing of this and when we rewatched it, which is the thing that gets them so fucking excited for this house is a nook. Now, let me explain. The nook that's featured in this home is not like a sit-in nook that you could like read a book in. It's literally just like an awkward little concave in the living room. And let me just tell you, fuck those. They're not fun. You have to look for very specific furniture to fit it, and it's like, it's a pain in the ass. Like, there's no benefits to having a nook. Like, just get like a couch in our chair or something. Like, I don't know. The fact that that was the selling point, that they were just like, well, we'll have a nook. I just couldn't get on board with it.
I'm not gonna lie. I think this is a Michael Jacobs thing because the Torkelsons, one of his early things, has a nook. Like, she always like sat out in the window and she did that. And then in Girl Meets World, her bedroom has a nook that
they
she
chose it for the nook.
They chose it for the Nook. The Nook is important to a
Wow.
Michael Jacobs story. So I wanted to make that connection.
Shit. Okay.
But what is even funnier is in the next scene, we have Shawn, Angela, Topanga, and Cory at the current apartment.
Yeah, the married
And
dorms. Yeah.
yeah, and I love Topanga here being like, "Ah!" Like it was again
Yeah.
like comedic performance from Danielle. It's really funny. But Shawn goes to them, hey, you could put a small bookshelf right here. There are built-ins.
There's a built-in bookshelf
There's
right on the
built
other side of the wall. And they
they
spend the whole episode looking at the other side, being like, a bookshelf would look good there. And look behind you.
that was my one thing. The one thing they kept talking about these bookshelves, and you know what? We'll get a bookshelf here. You can put a bookshelf, and I was like, you have built-ins right over there, and you want a nook, and you can't take care of the bookshelf.
Also, I've literally never seen y'all read.
Yeah, like because remember, like again, she said Angela and Shawn are reading. Cory and Topanga do not read anymore.
Do not read. So what
They're
are you
not
putting
reading.
on those bookshelves? Let's be real.
Anyway, I thought this was really funny because this I thought we would bring it up. Like Shawn is walking around and he's like, "You have a good space.
I
This is
love that. Yeah.
the type of space that you and I talked about having." And I liked that Shawn was like looking around and being like, "This isn't bad, you guys.
Can
Yes,
I
it's a fixer-upper, but you have to fix it up."
Yeah. And can I just tell you that, and I don't know if this is true across the board, but in my personal experience, it feels like people who grew up low income or who like had to live in a bunch of different apartments or things like that have a little bit more imagination as to how to fix something up because they've been forced to live in places where it's like we have to. The Cory and Topanga of it all, where it's like, well, we can't find anywhere else to live, so we might as well make this work. Whereas when I talk to people who are like, oh, I lived in my parents' house my whole life, like they sometimes struggle to have the same imagination when looking at like interior design shit or just kind of like that whole organization or functionality or fixer upper stuff. It just feels like something they struggle with. And that's just been my experience. I'm not trying to like speak for everyone, but
I get what you're saying. I was gonna say, so I think it may not be necessarily a class thing, although class is important. But I do think that it has something to do with like whether or not your parents, and sometimes their parents did this because they didn't have the finances, your parents instilled in you the importance of taking care of your own things
mm,
and being resourceful and cleaning up after yourself. Like we kind of know that Eric and Cory and all of these boys have always had Amy. Like we
yeah.
don't see them cleaning up on a regular basis. We don't see them going out and buying the groceries and all this other stuff. They come from a working class family, like a middle class family, but
Mhm.
we don't see them actually doing the work. And I think that is important because, as you said, I look at their entire apartment. I'm like, oh, you go get a wet vac. You clean that rug. You like y'all are sitting on that couch, and that is a bold choice from anyone.
Yeah.
Like you get rid of that couch, like you buy yourself a blow up mattress. You start washing the walls. There, like I look at that place, and all I see is potential. Because,
Yeah.
as you said, I grew up in a space where we're going to make the most of what we currently have. What do we currently have? How
Sure.
can we make that better? What is functional? Like Shawn says, Cory, fix the pipes.
Yeah.
Like that's your job. That's what you
Take
do.
some take some pride in your place and learn to fix your pipes is what he says to him, which is so interesting that Shawn has that outlook that Alan is trying desperately to teach Cory. Like for whatever reason, Shawn gets it when Cory doesn't. And I think that's really interesting.
Well, you say for whatever reason, and I think we've
Well,
talked about
yeah.
it. They don't say it, and I kind of wish they had. I do wish that they had said or they had allowed a line of Shawn just being like, "Dude, think of where I came from."
Yeah.
And
I wish.
honestly,
Yeah.
tell me that this isn't doable. Are you saying that I wasn't doable? Like I didn't make it work? Like my parents didn't make it work? We were able to operate with less. You have so much going for you, and you know that I come from a family that doesn't.
Sure. Or just the idea of like, bro, you've been over to my trailer multiple times and now you're acting like you're too good for this, or were you too good for it then? Like really kind of ask him about it. What's really
Having a met
interesting.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I was
I
just
was-
gonna say the thing that I really like is Sean's telling him, hey, you have to earn it. Like you're just This is your place. You have to fix it up. If you want nice things, you have to earn it. And then Cory rebuttals with, well, you guys have a good deal and you're not even married, and that's not fair. So maybe you need to rethink your ship because, yeah, we're struggling, but you guys aren't married. So boom, sinners. And I'm like, what is
Yeah,
happening?
it made, like, again, it was weird because this idea of Cory, like, I first of all think that Cory was just kind of speaking out of turn and of course saying things, and Cory is being entitled and privileged to be like, oh, you guys have it so easy and you're not even like it's easy to say that when you have a nice place to live, which goes back to what I was saying. However, for him to say that because Shawn and Angela aren't married, therefore they don't really understand the struggle and they don't deserve to have a nice place to sleep. As you said, no one required you to get married. You
No.
getting married isn't even the norm for the white middle class um storyline that everyone adheres to. Like, you go to school, you go to college, then you get married. You moved it ahead.
Yeah.
So you moved it out of order. You did what you wanted to do. And all of a sudden you're mad at Shawn for not following you along in your choices. That's
And also,
stupid.
are they so conservative to not think that a couple in college would live together and not be married? Like, are we really doing this?
I feel like, okay, so like in universe, I would say that in universe, it makes sense that Cory would be a little jealous of Shawn. Because again, Cory's whole idea is I should be doing better than Shawn. And if I'm not doing better than Shawn, then the universe isn't right. That's how we've seen this happen several times. Remember the episode where Shawn got the job or the internship and Cory didn't? It's
Yeah.
like that competing thing where Cory is like, no, in our lives, I should be doing better than Shawn. And the fact that I'm not means that I have to tear Shawn down a little bit. Terrible friend.
Honestly,
However,
I get Cory being jealous. I get Cory projecting. He's kind of doing that to everyone throughout the episode. So I don't really think of it as a personal thing he's doing to Shawn. My problem is Shawn validating what Cory says.
I was going to say that the problem that follows this is that the show itself is taking a conservative lens. The show itself later has us re-examine Angela and Shawn's and be like, hey, we didn't earn this. We have it too good. We need to suffer. And I was like, no, you don't.
No.
You've suffered. Like this idea of I need to suffer in order to enjoy life. It's wrong. Like,
Also, that doesn't work with a character who's been suffering for 6 years.
thank you.
Whereas Shawn and whereas Cory and Topanga are like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to us. Shawn has gone through 9 of those in the last 3 years. So, like, does he not just get to enjoy the fucking paper and drink his coffee without feeling like the devil is gonna judge him for it? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's my exact point. The idea that like Shawn and Angela, like we know that they have a rougher situation going on, and we know that it's been a journey for them, and they are in a good place, and they've made the right decision. They didn't get married young. They didn't force all their friends to attend their wedding and then try to bail them out. Like they are standing on their own 2 feet as much as they possibly can, even though we do get acknowledgement that they
Thank you.
say that someone else is paying for our apartments, which I assume for Angela is her father, and for Shawn, it has to be Jack.
Like, I truly don't like it brings up more questions than answers when they're like, because the entire time I'm like, well, why is this so much harder for Shawn and Angela than it is for Cory and Topanga? Okay, well, Shawn and Angela have help. Well, yes, it's been implied that Alan isn't helping Cory, but he's never outright said, hey, I'm cutting you off. That would make us, the audience, think, wow, their lifestyle change is so drastic now.
Exactly.
Stupid
It happened.
couples. Their lifestyle change is so drastic now because they got cut off. Like there was nothing to insinuate that that was the issue. So again, who's paying for Shawn's apartment? Who is giving Shawn living expenses? Why is it that Shawn, whoever is helping him, is able to give him more than Cory is able to provide for himself? Like, there's so many questions that I kind of want to get into, and we kind of skip over it, and it's fine. But who is paying for Shawn?
That's a very good question. Before we get too much, because I do want to come back to the Shawn and
Mhm.
Angela of it all, I want to say that Cory again is challenged to fix this thing. We get a
Yeah.
cute scene of them Cory saying, "Hey, I'm gonna fix the sink." Topanga, and him playing Swap Monster. It's a
So
really
cute. Yeah.
and it's cute. It's them as a married couple. It's newlyweds. I get it. Then we get the return of
Can I just say that, like, this scene of them playing Swamp when they're just kind of chasing each other, I was like, oh, there's been a few times where people have mentioned that there could have been a spin-off, there could have been a season 8 in New York. And if it had been more stuff like this, of them just like being an early married couple and learning what it's like to be on their own, like I kind of would have been super into it. I feel like these storylines of them being like on their own for the first time is really where the show should have gone and continue to go if there were to be a season 8.
it's a little it reminds me a little bit of How I Met Your Mother.
Yes.
You know
How I
what I'm
Met Your
talking
Mother, the
about?
early years of How I Met Your
With
Mother.
Marshall and Lily. Like
Yes.
that's what I'm getting from this. And again, like this idea of like Cory going around and like they're chasing. He's like, "Oh, whatever you do, don't turn on the water." And oh no, I accidentally. And they're like having this fun flirtation, but they're also newlyweds. But then also the neighbor comes, and I was gonna say Marisol Nichol comes back as Kelly and the
Yeah.
baby, and then now you have a baby and all this other stuff. Like I found that to be fun, and it reminded me of Marshall and Lily when they get their place and like having to build and figure it out as a couple. I liked the scene.
It gave me Mad About You vibes, and I was just like, this is the dynamic, the like early 20s kind of adult dynamic that I think could have made the show live on, is embracing that aspect of it.
It's so funny that you say that because the other day someone sent me a link to interviews that the cast did at the time of the wedding episode. And in that interview, Danielle says, "We are changing the show a little bit. It's going to be a little less school, a little more Mad About You."
Wow.
So I thought that that was funny that you said exactly that
Wow.
because that's what they
Okay.
were going for.
Wow. And
Exactly.
succeeded. Okay.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. So we have Topanga said something which I thought was important. She goes, "I'm a good babysitter." And I was like, "Oh yes, again, Danielle used to babysit. By the way, why aren't you babysitting now for money? Open
Yeah.
up a babysitter that like again, if you guys need finances, if you need things to do, use your resources, use your talents. Like Danielle should be tutoring and babysitting. Cory can get a job. Like these are all things that are possible, and yet they don't want to quite force them to do that. They just want to show them complaining, which
Yeah.
is important, but also I needed someone to be like, job postings are over there.
Yeah, exactly. Mention employment at some point. The one thing I want to say is that I really like at first I kind of dismissed the character of Kelly, but in this episode specifically, when she comes over, I'm like, she plays a really important part and making Topanga feel like this place is more like home by introducing the aspect of community, by saying, "Wow,
Yes.
you're a good neighbor," and what that means to Topanga to hear, like, "Wow, we are neighbors. I guess, yeah, you live next door and we're helping each other out. I guess we are in this." Like, it just makes her feel more comfortable in that place simply by having Kelly just acknowledge that she's like enjoys them living there.
I also love the idea of them being like, "Hey, go see a movie." And she's like, "Can I go back and sleep?
Yeah,
Can I just go sleep? That's all
yeah.
I want to do as a new mom." So I thought that was really great. And also the idea that the baby slept for them. The baby slept for them, and then Cory fixes it, and the water's clear, and they're
Well,
very
the
proud.
thing I loved, which I thought was a very good Michael Jacobs moment too, was that Kelly's like, "The baby loved Itsy Bitsy Spider," and then Topanga's like, "Hey, how's the doing with the water spout over there, Cory?" And they were able to connect it and make it work
Come
for what.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't think about that, but you're right. That's good. And then we go, I think it's funny, if not very disgusting if you think too closely about it, that Cory continues to just walk around with the sledge on him. But when he
Yes.
goes back to Alan and Amy's and they're like, "Look, drink it." And I was like, "Is it poisoned?"
Yeah.
They're like, "No, we fixed our water pipes." And they're like, "This is what we were trying to tell you." And I was like, well, I like this. A few things. One, Cory needs to apologize to Shawn.
Sure.
Uh, doesn't do that, and I don't think we'll ever see that happen. And then this idea that they were like, we fixed it and we took care of the baby.
Mhm.
And they're like, they took care of the baby. And I was like, no, y'all didn't, like, they just said the baby. You have no context of what the baby means.
Nope.
Are we not reacting to the idea that they said we took care of the baby, and you know that they don't have, like, anyone else would be like, what do you mean, baby? I need answers. Give me clarity.
They don't want to know. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to get brought into it. They're
No,
gonna
but
have
I'm
to
just
sign more
saying, like,
paperwork.
you would think that like, when I hear that from a newlywed couple coming in and saying, and we took care of the baby, you would think that that means Topanga's pregnant.
What baby should be the question. But
Exactly. What baby? That's it. I just wanted to be like, they never acknowledged the baby. And I was like, we should be talking about the baby. Even having Amy have a line where she's like, excuse me, you said baby? What do you mean by baby? Like, anyway.
Yeah, honestly, I just think there was just so much going on that they just kind of ignore Cory at this point. But this, honestly, like, there's not a whole lot to say about this because it's so, like, well written. It's so well done at this point of this kind of turnaround where you realize Alan's been trying to teach Cory this lesson and Cory's been kind of shunning. But the way that Cory's progression throughout this episode, his evolution, I feel like is very true to what a 19-year-old's would be. I just, it's very good, but I don't really know what else to say about it other than I thought it was a well acted scene and a well, like, orchestrated evolution for Cory to have throughout the episode. I don't really feel that Topanga had that big of an evolution, but I felt like Cory did.
Oh, we kind of skipped over that because I meant to say Topanga's calling Alan dad. She's
Well,
like,
when she
Dad,
wants
call me
something.
dad. Yeah, and I was like, this is interesting. Again, like, it's so, like, I like that we get Topanga to ride along. Topanga gets to be Cory's partner, the most that she's ever been Cory's partner.
Yeah.
And it's fun to watch, and it's fun to see them be a couple, and it's fun to see her also get to be silly with her liars and all
Yeah.
that stuff. But it does kind of rob her of her own agency and power, and that's just kind of something I would want more of. But overall, I did like it, and I thought we ended well, and we're calling Alan dad again, and all
Sure.
that.
Topanga really operates as comedic relief in this episode. Like, she's not really the person who learns the lesson along with Cory, even though at one point she tells Alan and Amy, like, I don't really get this either. And then at the end, I guess she has that same aha, but it just feels more like Cory's moment. So it seems like Topanga's really just brought in for levity in a lot of these scenes. Like, she's the one who's like, I don't know, kind of forcing Cory to kind of have the change that he's having.
It's the boy in Boy Meets World. And there is
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, there is a little bit of patriarchy of, like, Cory has to provide for his wife, and therefore she is there to give him something to work for.
Well, she plays with the baby while he fixes the sink. It's traditional
Exactly.
gender roles.
Exactly. So,
Rearing their
again,
ugly
it's
heads.
very weird that we're starting to see the show be more conservative. Like, the show isn't always that conservative, but every once in a while it rears its conservative head, and you're just kind of like, interesting. Speaking of conservative, let's talk about Shawn and Angela.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, this is the C storyline. We're going to come back to the B, but this idea of them having fun, being a good couple in the beginning, then going to visit Cory and Topanga, and Cory outright telling Shawn that he doesn't deserve the life that he has, which, again, to me is disrespectful when you know Shawn's history. And I get that it was Cory speaking out of turn, but, like, why would you say that to someone like Shawn? Again, and mostly because you feel like he has a better living situation than you do. And then for Shawn to feel the exact same way, it makes sense that Shawn would internalize that and go to Angela and be like, "Hey, we didn't earn this. Like, what are we doing? We have people helping us. Like, we haven't suffered." I wish Angela had been like, we will suffer in our own time, in our own way. You don't have to be like Cory." But instead they go, "Oh, do you want what Cory has? You want to get married?" And he's like, "No." And they're like, "Nah." And I was like, "No, no." Again, you just kind of backtracked it, but we need to be having these conversations. You know what I'm saying?
100%. And what's interesting is that Angela is like, hey, Shawn, are you jealous of Cory and Topanga's suffering almost? But what's really happening, and I wish Angela could just kind of point out, like, hey, is this not just codependency? Is this that the person who used to be your everything is now questioning your life decisions? And because you've always attach your choices to their preferences, you no longer feel comfortable making decisions on your own. And so if they're questioning it, it's making you lack your own confidence in your own decision making. Like, that's really what's happening here. It
Yes.
has very little to do with the fact that Shawn is overwhelmed with guilt now. It's like, no, you finally have a great living situation. Also, you're banging. Like, you're clearly banging. Like, why would you go back to, like, it just doesn't make sense to me that he would backtrack out of the situation that just happened. At least give them a few episodes to live together and like see if like issues happened. Like, maybe they didn't like
when we just got a dog. Like, that's another thing. Like,
that dog got put down. No one's keeping that dog.
well, it's funny because like, so we kind of skipped over this, but the idea of like, again, they were already living together. They were like, hey, it's me, Shawn, and Rachel. And then later on, Rachel's like, hey, I'm going to give you two space. I already got a opportunity to be an RA. I'm going to move out. And I was like, okay. So we went through all of this. It's Jack's apartment.
It's musical chairs.
He was living with Eric. But then they invited you. But then you hooked up with Jack, so Eric moved out. But then, since you and Jack broke up, Jack, whose apartment it is, moved out. So now it's you and Angela and Topanga. But Topanga gets married, so she moves out and Shawn moves in. And again, you have been the longest person here up until this point. However, because Shawn and Angela are together, you're going to move out, leaving it just to be Shawn and Angela. However, Angela and Shawn feel like we aren't ready to take that step because we haven't earned suffering right enough. So Angela moves out, and I'm like, none of this makes sense. It is a game of musical chairs. The landlord has to be like, who is getting mail here? Who isn't?
Yeah.
And ultimately, I was like, for Rachel to do all she did earlier this season and then voluntarily leave.
Yeah.
I would be so mad if I was Jack. But of course, we just have Jack and Eric move back. So
yeah, like honestly, the whole apartment switcheroo thing, it's just confusing at this point. I remember being a kid and like I think I actually missed this episode in its live like airing.
Yeah.
And so when I came back and everyone was switched around, I was like, wait, what's going on? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there hasn't been enough time to help me understand as an audience viewing this every other episode or whatever that they were in 1999. Like, to be able to follow this switcheroo that's going around.
Switcheroo. And I thought about that. I was like, this episode is a linchpin for a lot of things, and you do have to watch it to kind of understand some things before and after. So I agree with you, because like if you miss this episode, I imagine the next episode you're confused on why everything is where it is.
Yeah.
The only thing I wanted to acknowledge also, having the dog. Can you have a dog in that apartment that big? But then again, we buying houses for $80,000. Like, it's probably a Wild West.
This is the kind of thing that, like, last week when you were talking about how, like, so you went through the process of getting a loan and then you just left. Like, oh, so you bought a dog and then just what? Now you and Eric are gonna watch this dog? Like, I don't know if we're ever gonna see this dog again, but can I just say, why not have Shawn bring a pig into this? Why not connect the dots and have a little Cory? Because in season 5, when he was living with Jack and Eric, we were led to believe that he was still living with the little Cory. So clearly he has an affinity for pigs. It would have just made sense for him to be like, I got my own place. I'm finally fucking doing it.
That is funny. I didn't think about that. That's funny. I kind of wish I had thought about it. I just thought that the dog was way too big. It's clearly like supposed to be a sight gag, but it was also like there's no real thought put into.
It's like a Megazord version of a Saint Bernard. I don't know what this actual dog is, but it's massive.
It is. It's huge. And then, as you said, they're like, oh, by the way, we're not going to keep this dog. They literally go, so who's going to tell him that we're not living together? I was so upset that by the end of it, Angela and Shawn had decided to not stay together, because it was like, you don't have a reason to not be together other than you both think that, oh, now's not the time for us to have it easy. And they're like, promise me when the time comes, we'll have a raggedy place of our own. And it's like, why? Why would you want that? Why would you, as writers, why would you want for someone to want that?
And why isn't Angela being like, hey, remember how we said that we weren't going to try to just do everything the way Cory and Topanga do it? Like, we're our own couple, we can have our own path. Like, it's really showing the audience and the kids watching the show that there's really only one correct way to have a relationship.
Yep.
Whereas you should be able to introduce children to a variety of different relationship types, since kids come from a variety of different types of households. So I wish that there would have just been like an acceptance that, like, yeah, Cory and Topanga are doing it their way and we're doing it our way.
Exactly, but we can't have them live in sin. Apparently, I think that's the ultimate.
That's the big one. The
ultimate thing.
sin. The sin factor plays massive in this
Okay,
one.
so I want to go to our B storyline now because
What?
I've been waiting to talk about this. Okay, no, this is really important because if ever I needed confirmation that Jack is a gay man, it is
Ooh.
specifically with the introduction of Bridget. Bridget is played by Nicole Eggert, who is known as Jamie Powell on Charles in Charge, and played Summer on Baywatch. She was also in several other things. She's a really popular character actress. However, this woman comes in. Again, we get Eric being like, girls, girls, girls. Hot girl comes in. She's like, who's running this place? Jack is like, I'm the manager. She introduces herself. I'm your new boss. Immediately says, hey, by the way, got the job through nepotism, which I thought was interesting that we at least acknowledged nepotism, because she immediately says, oh, I got this job because my daddy is chancellor. And I was like, again, don't know if that's how that works, but okay, whatever. She goes, I'm spoiled. I get what I want. She feels kind of flat as a character, but she immediately says,
oh,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was.
We're gonna do this. I'm gonna keep going. She immediately says that I get what I want. I'm spoiled, and Jack goes to her. And again, Eric is just blindsided by this. He's just like, "Oh my god, hot girl, whatever." And you would expect that other guys would be like, "Oh my god, hot girl."
Yeah.
Eric's like, if we want to talk good looking and rich daddy, you ain't messing with me. I do it better, and like I look better doing it. And I was like, this is a gay man. Like, you absolutely are like, oh, I am not impressed by your charms, your look, anything. I am just as much of a spoiled daddy's girl as you are, and I'm not gonna let you get my friend down. And I was like, this is all the evidence I've ever needed of Jack being a gay
Because
man.
at what point Bridget's like, so are we gonna make out? Are we gonna do this or not? And he's like, no, we're
Yeah,
not.
exactly. He's like, I would never, and I'm not gonna let my friend either. And I was like, oh, again, he's sticking up for his man. I don't care what any of y'all say. My head canon has it all there because again, it's like they could have had it be this like, oh God, I'm seduced by her and I hate her, like all this other stuff. But no, they specifically make a point to say that Jack has zero interest in her. He's already like good looking, rich. That's my world, baby doll.
But they also make it a point to have Eric say, I'm a
like the
Teletubby,
not the
purple
one.
one, though.
Yep. I knew where you were going.
Why is that joke in there?
Because we need to make sure that they know. What's also funny is that Jack does seem to have a bit of misogyny himself, which, to be fair, gay men do have. But he's like, when he goes, tell her I'm the man. I'll do it when I want to. I was like, that's your boss. Like, even if you don't like her, it's still your boss. You still have to be respectful. But then she says, take off my shoe and suck my third toe. And I was like, okay, so what are we doing here? No one is doing, by the way, this is still an open student union. Students are still unionizing all over the place.
It's suck my toe, Eric fainting. Like, it's fun, I guess. Like, it's funny. I don't know. Like, can I be honest? The entire time that Bridget was there, I couldn't help but having that scratch my head season 7 feeling of, haven't we had this story before? Wasn't there a girl named Desiree who was spoiled and Eric was chasing after and she treated him like shit, and then he eventually got to the point where he learned and realized, like, wow, there are women out there who will do this to me. I need to be smarter. Like, we've done this. Why isn't Eric getting better? Are you even acknowledging the fact that, like, I've also have experience with women like this? Something.
Well, Eric's simple. We know that. Like, that's just like, we allow Eric to be simple. But what I think is important, to your point, Desiree is able to still seduce Jason. Jason is equally won over by Desiree in the end.
Okay.
However, we make it clear that Jack has zero interest in her at all. I just think it's amazing. It's so amazing. Jack doesn't look at another girl after Rachel. He is all about Eric and protecting Eric, and I think that's something worth looking
This is
into.
very true.
The last thing I was going to say is that, as you were talking about, you'd be kind of confused is the fact that Bridget fires Jack, and that doesn't really have any ending.
Well, no, can we just talk about like what Eric and Jack are talking, and then Jack's like, she's gonna come over, and you got to be like, "Shut your cake hole, Irene."
Yeah,
Which
exactly.
is this a quote from Me, Myself, and Irene? What is this from? That
I
they
have
keep
no
saying?
idea.
It feels like an inside joke that somehow Michael Jacobs was cool with. Like it feels very niche.
Yeah, it
Whatever
does
it
feel very
is, and
niche.
it does make Jack feel misogynistic. And I've searched this quote. I feel like it's only from the show, yet I can't understand why it would only be from the show. It feels like it should be.
No, again, I just think it like I've known enough misogynistic men to be like, no, it's just shut your cake hole, Irene. It's just like it doesn't even have to be a
Her
quote from
name.
anything. It's just the idea of disrespecting her and the way to
Okay.
put her back in her place. And I think that that's terrible. I do not like that we're doing this. However, just gives credit to my theory. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
anything else you want to say?
No, I feel like this again mirrored the Desiree storyline so much. I really wish there had been some crossover there. Like this idea that Jack is also, a rich kid who comes from this lifestyle. It kind of reminded me of Jonathan Turner when it was like, oh, you're really from Connecticut and you're really this person. Like, I wish that Jack would have had the point where instead of leaning into it, he would have been like, like I've learned to treat people with more respect or something like
Yes.
that, where he's like teaching Bridget or helping Bridget versus kind of like being like, well, I can be a better rich snobby person than you. Like I didn't really care for that. So
I love that. I didn't think about that idea, but the idea of Jack going to Bridget and being like, "Hey, I also used to use money and my looks as a way to get through life, but I'm going to tell you it's not going to last and you're going to." And even if he had like this huge speech to her that is like, "Hey, I'm trying to connect," and she's like, "Yeah, you're fired. I don't need it." Like that's fine, but at least
yeah,
to me, we would have kind of like a little mini art. And in this, we really don't. She
yeah,
fires Jack, and that's it.
that's just
Like
the end of it.
there's no resolution. There's no ending for Eric or Jack or Bridget. And that
Yeah.
kind of makes me upset because
Or
it's
if
like,
we
what
had
are we
this thing where
doing?
Bridget fires Jack, but then afterwards she kind of gives him a look like she has a little bit of a crush on him, kind of setting up something in the future. Like, I don't know, just give me something to make this storyline feel worth it.
I agree. Like that my real thing is like it has no conclusion. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's why it feels kind of out of place. And as I said, I think it would have worked better in the previous episode because
Mhm.
this uses Jack and Eric in a way that would have made sense to use Eric last episode than what we're doing right now. Anywho, Brad moment. What is your Brad moment?
Honestly, all of the slut stuff, like that stuff, like basically shaming Shawn and Angela for premarital sex was like a key storyline in this episode, and I'm not here for it.
I agree with you. I think that's great. Because you did that one, I'm going to choose Bridget's whole sexual harassment of her employees.
Yeah.
I'm really, and then of course the entire Bridget storyline. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, I get that we're supposed to have a woman in charge, girl boss, yes, but the idea that she is sexually assaulting her um employees and we respond to that not with empathy or sympathy but just with misogyny, put a woman back in her place. I'm like, ugh.
There's two things I want to say about that. One is Jack at one point says, what would be embarrassing if I let a surgically augmented daddy's girl ruffle my feathers? And I was like, oh, okay, now we're shaming her for that too. Okay, we're really getting down.
Gay man, I'm telling you. As a
I,
gay man, Jack is written as a gay man.
to contradict that, I feel like Eric has some really funny jokes in the scene where one, he's like, meets the new boss. It's Bridget Murphy and goes, Murphy, like the bed. And I was like, great delivery, so funny. And then there's another one where Bridget's like, my dad is the chancellor. I like to call him daddy. And Eric goes, I like to call him daddy too. And I was just like, I don't know. Like, you're so funny when you're not forced to be in ridiculous situations. Like, you can make the grounded, normal stuff funny. Like, we don't have to be so over the top. So I just wanted to point that out as we were kind of.
No, I agree. I agree. I loved it. I loved it. Feeny lesson. What's your Feeny lesson on this episode?
That the greatest joys in life come when you take pride in your life, take pride in your home, take pride in your relationships, and you work to make them better. There's gifts that come from that are a bigger reward than the initial monetary or product value of whatever it is you wanted.
I'm gonna use
That's a real long way of
yeah.
saying just that, like, the best things in life are free, maybe. I don't know.
No, I don't think it's the best things in life for free. I think that, or if that's your lesson, that's fine. But what I think you were saying and what I'm going to use is Alan's lines of um, figure it out. So you have to figure, sometimes life is going to be hard, figure it out. And how do you feel about doing things yourself?
Yeah.
Now that you've done it yourself, you feel better. Not that it was solved for you, but that you were able and capable of figuring it out.
And one thing I just want to say, because I kind of forgot to mention this earlier too, was that I love when Alan says, you know, when me and your mom were struggling, that was the best part of our marriage, and I would never want to take that away from you. And I think there is something to, like, the trauma bonding of, like, starting a new life and, like, kind of going out on your own, and, like, that's helpful in those, like, early times in the relationship. So I'm sure something in there's like a very eloquent Feeny lesson, but you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I think you're right because it's really funny. Like even like the trauma bonding of it all. I think constantly about how like when me and my husband got our dog, like that became like we created our own language
Yeah.
because we had these like inside jokes because we had gone through something together. We were both watching him develop. We had like little stories of like, hey, this happened and this happened.
Yeah.
And I think of like again, like their swamp, we were playing Swamp Monster. It's like, oh, you will remember that. You will
Yeah.
remember building and refurnishing and having something in common that you can tell later down the line. And I do
Yeah.
think that that's really important. Like again, it doesn't necessarily have to be trauma. I think that's important, but sometimes the shared interest of it all, the shared experience of it all is what makes a relationship.
Can I add to that real fast? We were on, this is relevant, I promise. I was on like a corporate meeting like a while ago, and they were like, you know, how can we build, you know, camaraderie amongst employees? And I was like, you know what's so funny? Every white collar job I've ever had has struggled with building camaraderie, but every blue collar job I ever had, like, the camaraderie was like there. And I think it was because like we were in the trenches together.
Yes.
And there was something about that built a bond with me and like those people I worked Black Friday with, you know, because we were just like up at 5 a.m. and we had to get to the store and we had to open it up. And like there was something about that built a bond that I'm not able to get when I'm just like Zoom meeting. And so I there's something I think that can be applicable to what Alan's talking about here too.
To your point, the thing is building camaraderie has to deal with you guys having something in common other than the trauma or being able to talk about the trauma in a free and open space. Like companies are like, how do we create bonding? All right, like just pay for people on the company's hours. So like, I don't know if it's online and Zoom, everyone sign in and we're gonna play like video games together. And your bosses will not be there because they don't need to be there.
Yeah.
You don't need to bond with your boss. Your boss is your boss. And there's nothing you can do that will change that. But you do need to be able to trust each other. You do need to be able to be like, oh, hey, he's really good at this. He's really good at that. Well, like, what is it called? I'm thinking of escape rooms, all these things. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do that on the company's time, on the company's dollar,
Sure.
and without having to like make us do anything extra other than show up.
And there's also something to like when you're grumpy and you have to be at a work like early in the morning, when you find that person who can make you laugh and kind of make that a little bit easier for you, that's that bond. That's
Correct.
that camaraderie that has
Exactly.
nothing to do with like your employer trying to manufacture something. It's just like, no, this person was speaking what was on my mind right now, and they said it, and now I rock with Mark because
Absolutely.
of
The
that.
the ability to like look over like the people who from my previous job I really connected it with the people who I could look over with and just look and be like, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, or be like, we gonna chat later.
And that's how you find your people. That's really how it happens. Yeah.
Okay. Grade. What grade are you giving this?
I'm gonna give this episode a B minus. It
Okay.
was okay. Like I said, there were things I liked about it. I loved the honestly, if the Eric and Jack storyline was gone, I probably would have liked the story a lot better. If it was just Eric and Jack and Cory and Topanga and the Shawn and Angela stuff wasn't there, I think it would have worked better. But the combination of the Angela and Shawn stuff and the Jack and Eric stuff, I was just like, you know what? There's too many beefs I have with both of these storylines for me to feel completely comfortable giving this a higher grade. So,
I agree with you. I'm gonna give it a C for that very reason. I think like, the A storyline is fantastic. I think
yeah,
we do really good lessons. I love these life lessons that we're learning. I love to see Cory and Topanga be a couple. However, the other two storylines, I have problems with both, and it does feel like it's one too many cooks in the kitchen.
yeah.
Like I feel like we could have removed one of these and had a better meal.
Well,
So
I will say this. I can't remember the last time I've found Cory as likable as I have in the episode and the episode before. Like these last two episodes, I'm like, wow, I like Cory a lot more than I have, especially all through season 6. So like, there's an improvement happening, I think.
I agree. And I will say, I want to give credit. I feel like season 7, I understand what people are like. It's not as bad, at
Yeah.
least so far. It's not as bad as I was expecting it to be. We did have a rough start. There, it really did start off with like, what are we
Hmm.
doing? But now, especially that we're married, I feel like, okay, these storylines are making sense. I like what we're doing here. I just feel like sometimes we throw in a little wackiness to like even it out, and I'm like, we didn't need that wackiness.
Yeah. We'll see how you feel after next week's episode.
Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, next week's episode. Okay, we are going to do our Pod Meets World reacts. So if you want to check those out, go over to our Patreon. We are going to talk about Pod Meets World Janitor Dad, and then we're going to come back. Homework. What do you got for homework?
My homework for this week is, I am gonna let you start with homework.
I don't really have homework. Oh, actually, no, I take that back. I was looking. I've watched a lot of stuff. None of it was really good.
Yeah,
So
like same. Like I've been watching stuff, and you know what? I know that there's big things that I have to watch, but I've just been like kind of busy. And the problem with like for example, everyone's been telling me to watch The Bear, but it feels like kind of a homework assignment at this point.
mm,
And like now I know that like I need to dedicate time and sit down and watch it. And
yeah,
because of that, it feels like a bigger chore. So I'll just put on something passive and end up watching 8 hours of it. And that's been how it's gone for me
I
lately. And
completely understand it.
I will say this, that I rewatched A Quiet Place recently, and I fucking love that movie. I love that movie. It's so well done. It's so like quiet and quiet. It's paced so well, and it builds up perfect tension. And I don't know if I'm gonna make that my homework, but sure, I'll make that my homework. I'm sure I've recommended it before, but I did rewatch it recently, and I absolutely loved it.
A Quiet Place, the first one, great, zero
Yeah,
notes, fantastic. The
yeah.
second one, very conservative, very what are we doing? I like it kind of like takes away all of the lessons. Like it removes all of the lessons that we had in the first one. And I'm like, why did we do this? Have you seen the trailer for the third one?
I was
This
gonna say
prequel.
the trailer for the third one looks but I also don't give a fuck about sequels anymore. Just drop it. Just
See,
let it go.
I disagree. I'm here for it because
You're
you know
here
what it
for
is?
like sequels in general, the concept of a Frozen like five.
No, I'm not in for the concept of a Frozen 5. I think that we now live in a world where there are anthologies. We now live in a world with IP, and I like the idea of I don't need a Frozen 5 where we are dealing with the same characters. But can I have a Frozen 5 where we learn about the other magic that is in the kingdom? Can I get a Frozen 5 where I don't know, some like we learn about snowmen and like all this other stuff? I don't know, maybe. Like I don't mind IP and expanding the world. A, because that's where we're at right now, and I just learned to accept that. But B, I also think I saw the trailer for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I'm really excited about that. Because again, we're not following James Franco from the first one. We have a whole new world with whole new characters. Prey 2 is getting a sequel. And I'm like, okay, let me see where that one's at. Because we liked how Prey did something new. I don't mind living in that universe and expanding the world. I do mind when we have to tell the same story over and over again with the same people. That bothers me.
I feel like the sequel situation, especially like Disney recently announced like all of their movies for the next 5 years are just sequels on sequels on sequels. Um, I feel like what's been happening is as people have been streaming more over the last 10 years, they've come to terms with this idea of like serialized storytelling, which has been translating into film with like the Marvel movies are a great example of that. And it just feels like everyone is trying to turn the movie experience into like a show that like has multiple episodes that you watch and things like that. The problem is that really good shows have a showrunner that's making sure that all of that shit makes sense.
I agree.
Whereas when you look at like I don't know, like Toy Story 4 or 5 that's about to come out or whatever. I'm just like, at this point, it's like there's no way that you guys are taking the care, that you guys are telling a story that maybe you had in mind a while ago. You guys are just cash grabbing, and I'm having sequel fatigue. I would much rather go out, find an experimental film, an art house. At this point, in general, like the big blockbuster movies, I'm kind of over.
But here's the thing. I said what your problem is exactly what I said, which is that we have the same characters and we're doing the same thing over
Yeah.
again. And that I agree with you. I don't need a Toy Story 5 where we have Woody and Buzz. Why? Because I feel like I've come to a resolution with those characters so many times at this point in time. But if we went back and we explored Sid's toys and like what they went up to and what lessons they learned and all this other stuff, see, you're already intrigued. It's
Mm-hmm.
already a little bit better. Like that's why I'm excited about A Quiet Place 3 because that one's a prequel. We're not opening the door and they're like, hey, John Krasinski, how did
Yeah.
you get here? It's like, no,
It
we're
takes
just
place in New York. It's a different setting. Yeah. You're right. I do love that. I love the idea of like, hey, this is an interesting story. I want to see it from a different perspective. I love the idea of seeing that with Harry Potter. I would love to see stories where it's like, the magical wizarding world in Hawaii or the wizarding world in Africa or like somewhere else. Like,
yes.
give me somewhere a new setting and like, let's explore these ideas under different political and, social constructs. Love that. But again, like, I don't need to see Elsa do her bit with Anna again. Like
And
I
that's
don't.
what I'm saying. I don't need to see that. And I agree with you. That being said,
Yeah.
my homework is season 3 of Abbott Elementary because
Oh, okay, okay.
I think the difference is what you were saying is with television, it is fun to kind of I think we're losing what makes movies movies and what makes television television.
Yeah.
Television is supposed to be serialized. You are
Hmm.
supposed to come back and you see these people and they are progressing, but they're still the same characters. And that's what
Sure.
we're getting with season 3 of Abbott Elementary. It came back in a really fun way, came back with a two-parter. By the time this come out, I think it'll be like on episode 3 or like 4 or 5. And I'm really having fun with the season. It's great to see the characters again. It feels like a classic television sitcom that we can all come together and talk about and have fun with in a way that I don't really think of. I can't think of another show where everyone is watching and it's a comedy and we're
Yeah.
having fun. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like there's Abbott Elementary is one of the few modern sitcoms that I feel like kind of can stand with the giants of the past. Like, I feel like you could put that up there with some of the better sitcoms of the 90s and 2000s, and it still works in an age where the sitcom is dying or dead. Like, that's still a prime example of how to do it right.
Absolutely. And I don't know. It was fun to be back. It was fun to see these characters again. I love the way that they are constantly teaching us about the field of teaching. I think that that's amazing, and I think everyone should check out Abbott Elementary season 3. And then as far as movies go, I'm with you. A classic rewatch. Go watch A Quiet Place. I think I might even do that because it is a good movie.
It's a great movie. Yeah, love it.
Okay, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. As usual, if you want to give us your homework recommendations or if you have anything that you would like to say to us, hit us up at brommeetsworld@gmail.com or at brommeetsworld on all of our social platforms. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. Follow us if you're on Instagram. Check out our Patreon for added content. Rate us if you haven't done that. I don't think we've said rate us in a while, so rate us. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, and give us a good rating, guys. Like,
absolutely,
don't fuck around. Like, we're trying to beat the algorithm. Help us out.
All 5. If you're like, how many stars should I give them? 5.
5.
I got 5 on it. I have no idea why, but that was good for me. Okay, so I also would like you guys to remember, as Feeny says, dream.
I would like you guys to remember, as Feeny says, to try.
And I would also like to remind you guys, as Feeny says, do good.
Dream, try, do good.
Oh, hey, those are all Feeny sayings.
There you go. How about that? We're learning lessons every day.
Later, bros.
Later, bros. This episode of Boy Meets World was produced by Ceej and edited by Tony Curtis. Boy Meets World is a 2 Free Tokens media production.
Bye.
Bye.
When this boy meets world.